Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. You know what? I figured I'd go ahead and go back. Well, not too far, but I went ahead and grabbed one of the games between Hikaru Nakamura and Wesley. So, in their speed chess championship match that they played, and this is game number 29. Total, I think they played like 38, 39 games, somewhere in there. So this is kind of like towards the end. But as always, for anybody who does want to jump straight to the analysis, I do have it time-stamped at the very top of the description. So feel free to click that. For everybody else, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. As always, for my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Magandang umaga, magandang hapon, almusal tayo. Hello ulit. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Samanyo ang kapayapaan. And also, kapayapaan sa inyo. So I'm going to just say both of them, bro. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking video, aking makaibigan. Man. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. As always, I'm spacing on this. Mabuting pagbati. That's what I meant to say. I was thinking Makito Tayo Mamaya. I don't know why I was thinking that. But anyways, appreciate you guys very much. Yes. So if you guys are ready to roll, I'm going to see, we're going to see what's rolling. So let's roll. All right, so we got E4, we got G6, D4, Bishop to G7. And of course, as you guys know, I talk about transpositions all the time. Of course, this can always be reached by D4, G6, E4, and then Bishop to G7. You know, transpositions do kind of make things a little easier as far as studying openings. It allows you to kind of chunk the openings together and, you know, kind of just save a little bit of time with, you know, working on them. So we do see knight to f3. We got d6. And then we do see bishop to c4 in the game. And then we have knight to f6 and then queen to e2. I mean, these aren't like necessarily sidelines. You know, this is pretty mainline stuff. Personally, if I come back up after d6, I do play by a different move order. But I am a, not c3. I am a King's Indian Larson player, so after these same types of movements, I will get this position myself. I really like the, you know, bunch of pawns you have in the center of the board, and if you want to get really crazy, you'll push f4 at some point as well. A lot of times you don't have the time to do it, though. But like I said, we did see this particular variation. We see castles by black. We got e5. Pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, and then we do have knight to d5. Of course, with the queen having moved, we do not have a double attack on this knight. But after h3, we do go ahead and make sure that we have the knight fully ensconced on that square with c6. We got castles. So this is more... you can kind of consider the King's Indian, but, you know, it's more so the modern. But I mean, both of those openings are very similar to each other. So, you know, you can kind of think of it how you want. But everything is very solid for white. You know, they do have really good space and development. You know, you see they have this pawn up here controlling these squares, gaining some space. You know, they just got to get, you know, a couple more pieces out, and they are a little bit further ahead than black. So we do have knight over to b6. We see bishop back to b3, and then we have a5, and that is the novelty of the game. I believe the other move that we've seen in this position is actually knight to a6. Whenever you have a knight that moves that many times in the opening, you're going to get to a novelty fairly quickly. But like I said, bishop to b3. We do see a5, and then we do have rook over to d1. This is going to be gaining a pretty juicy tempo on black, so it's never bad. Especially in these modern or King's Indian types of situations, rook over to d1 is going to be something that you almost always see, especially when you have trades down this file, because now it is an open file. So the queen side steps to c7. We got a3, you know, just creating a little bit of lift for our bishop. We got knight to a6, bishop to e3. We have bishop to f5. We got knight to c3. We see rook a to d8. And, I mean... this is a very, very dominant position. Did I not do that? I think I forgot. I sure did. I'm going to try to create the guess the move on the fly. But in this position right here, this is basically the way that Hikaru is playing this game. This is basically his game to lose. He has a very sizable advantage at this point in the game. You know, like I said, I mean, this is just very, very nice. For him, I mean, you kind of have, you know, you have some targets as white. You are hitting this knight, and this queen is really kind of stuck on c7. So if you could try to figure out a way to knock the queen away, you'll definitely have a little bit of material. So I guess I will go ahead and do it right here. If you want to go ahead and pause the video and try to guess the strongest move in the position, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So what we actually see in the game, which is something that you do typically see in these types of structures. When you have the King's Indian or even modern type stuff, this is a very thematic type of situation. And even though it does kind of look like it weakens the king a little bit, it's not super, super great in this position, but it is very thematic. And what we actually see Hikaru go in the game is g4. And he still has a very nice advantage. But what I was actually looking for is the move e6. The move e6 kind of causes some problems for black. Like either you basically sit there and do nothing and you allow this pawn to capture here with a check and damage black structure. Either way, your structure is going to be damaged. So one of the best things to do is actually just to take with the bishop. And then after the bishop takes, we do see pawn taking e6 and then knight comes to g5. There is not the best way to really protect this pawn. Simply because, like I mentioned before, queen is stuck on c7 because this knight will be hanging otherwise. And so you'd have to kind of make some type of move, like moving the knight somewhere so you can free your queen. And that's not going to really do anything to protect this pawn. But as you guys can see, this position is really, really nice for white because you have just damaged black's pawn structure. This pawn is going to be falling, so you're going to be left with an isolated pawn, and it's not a passed pawn. So that is something that is very, very nice. The alternate would have been if the pawn took on e6, and then, I mean, you're still pretty much going to come into pretty similar of a situation. But like I said, if you did guess e6, then congratulations. e6 is a very thematic move in these positions as well. But like I said, we did see g4, which, I mean, is a very legitimate move. Still, you know, like I said, the king isn't doing that bad. You know, even though you do kind of have a lot of the pawns pushed. As you notice, there are a lot of pieces for black that are kind of on the wrong side of the board. So you don't really have a lot of heat around this area. You know, you have this pawn pretty nicely covered. You can always like play like bishop to f4 or something like that. You know, like I said, you don't have really enough pieces on the king side for black to really like muster up a really nice attack on this position. So the bishop does come back to c8. We see knight up to e4. We got knight to d5. Bishop comes to g5. We see h6. Bishop comes back down to c1. We got b5. So, you know, black is trying to expand a little bit on the queen side, you know, especially try to, you know, play against this bishop right here. And so black has actually kind of like made a little bit of ground in this position. So actually, I mean, things are fairly equal. As you can see, you know, black has managed to place their knight just a little bit better. This bishop is kind of probably going to redirect or something like that. So, you know, the position has changed quite a bit. So we do have a4, b4, we got c4. And so, like I said, black is starting to gain a little bit of an edge. So we do have pawn taking c3, pawn taking c3, and then we do have bishop to e6. And actually, unfortunately, as you guys probably can see, this knight is now hanging. So this is actually a pretty bad blunder by Wesley So. So it's like I said, it was Hikaru Nakamura's game to lose early on, and it is his game to lose again as well. So the queen actually takes on a6, and I'm not really sure what happened, but Wesley So just kind of overlooked that he was hanging his knight when he did that. And so this causes, you know, kind of some problems for Wesley So. So we do see knight to b4, which if you play correctly, this isn't a really nice discovery on this bishop, just because you are hitting this queen. What we actually see in the game is rook taking d8, the knight taking on a6, the rook taking on f8 with check, and then the king taking on f8. And this is giving white a much more playable position. But if we actually back up, after the knight came to b4, if we actually just saw the pawn taking on b4, the bishop would be taking on b3, the rook would take on d8, the queen would take on d8, and then we would have bishop to a3. And as you can see, you know, white is up an entire piece. The pawn count is similar. So, I mean, you know, you're doing fairly well in this position for white. You are at about a +4 in this position here. But like I said, we didn't see that. So the king took on f8. And you do still have the extra piece as white, but it's just not as active. So we're taking on e6 with the bishop, pawn taking e6. We got rook over to b1. You know, it's always nice to try to get on an open file. You know, if you do have a rook. So we do have g5, and g5 is actually like a pretty legitimate move because it is taking away these possible squares for the bishop and for the knight. So what you're trying to do as black, you do have a little bit of superior material, but you are trying to restrict, you know, white as much as possible because, I mean, in reality, they do have 4 whole pieces. So, you know, it's a little bit tough. So we do see bishop to e3, and this is putting a nice little threat on this square here. We got king over to f7, and then the rook does come to b6. This knight is undefended at the moment, so why not attack it, right? So the knight comes back to b8. Knight e takes on g5 with check, and this, I mean, there really wasn't a lot better that you really could have did in the situation. I mean, this does free your pieces up a little bit. As I was saying before, this g5 move does restrict white's movement quite a bit. So, I mean, a lot of the times you do kind of have to sacrifice a piece so that you can free your position up just a little bit. So the knight e takes on g5, pawn takes g5. We see knight taking g5 with check. And then this, I mean, black is just able to just kind of sidestep everything with king up to g8. Of course, we're not going to shoot up to f8 because we're going to be looking at this howler. No, we don't want to do that. So king does come to g8. We see knight taking e6, queen up to c8. We got knight taking g7, king taking g7. And even though you are kind of equaling the pieces, you do have a lot of pawns. But you just have a little bit too much activity for black. And at some point, something is going to give. So we do see pawn up to e6, trying to deflect the queen away so we can just grab this rook, this knight. If we have the ability to do that, of course, if you see queen taking here and this takes here, you would actually be doing fairly equally because you should get into a position where you can kind of fortress the position. You know, this bishop is blocking this pawn is blocking this pawn. I mean, you should be able to configure your pieces in such a way where, you know, you simplify everything and then the queen isn't really able to overtake the rook and the bishop. But backing up, we do see c5. We got rook down to b5, double attacking the pawns. The knight comes up to c6 because it was very problematic on b8. We see rook taking c5, queen taking e6. We see king up to g2. Queen comes to e4 with check. And so, you know, black, like I said, is starting to like free themselves up a little bit and start to kind of grab some of white's material. The king comes up to g3. You see king over to f7. You got h4, and then you do actually see knight to e5. But unfortunately, this is a super lost position for white. So it is in this position that Hikaru Nakamura does resign the game. And the majority of the reason why you resign the game is because there really is no way to protect this pawn right here. If you try to push f3, of course, this is going to drop the bishop, and you've just lost a piece for protecting a pawn. So like I said, there is not really anything that you can do in this position to protect this. So what you're probably going to end up having to do is sacrifice your rook for this knight. Rook takes e5, and then queen will be taking on e5 with check. And I mean, black is just going to start kind of mopping up your pawns. So after you move over to f3, the queen will be taking on c3. After king comes to e4, queen to c6 with check, king down, and then queen taking a4. And at some point, this bishop is going to have to get onto this diagonal so that it can sacrifice itself for this pawn on. Can I draw an arrow, bro? it's going to have to sacrifice itself on A1, and then black also has the ability to swing over and start to grab these pawns. And the problem for white is the fact that these pawns are so far apart that this king, it's really kind of hard for the king to kind of, you know, do anything against it. So that was, like I said, game 29 from the match that Wesley So and Hikaru Nakamura did play. Since I did go past the 12 minutes, I will be doing a light analysis on this game. I'm going to go through and I'm just going to kind of simplify the video just a little bit and shave, you know, probably 4 or 5 minutes off. So as I always tell people, you know, anytime I go past 12 minutes on the video, I basically consider it too long, and I will be, you know, kind of trimming it down some, you know, so that it can be, you know, a lot shorter. So I'm kind of hitting, you know, the people that want like the full analysis and people that want the light analysis. So I appreciate you guys very much for coming. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Makito tayo mamaya and paalam, and I will see everybody next time.